got a big show for you today on the BWI Live Show. I'm Thomas Ryan Carr, Ryan Snyder, and Sean Fitz here are recruiting experts. This is a recruiting show. A lot of this is not going to be recruiting information, but it is the information you want to know and is the most important for this week. Of course, we're going to get into Penn State, Kent State from a bunch of different angles, including our predictions and our thoughts on the game coming up at the end of the show. We do have a big recruiting update in just a few minutes from all the things that happened this week. But gentlemen, normally I'll say hi and we'll get our intros and we'll have our conversation, but I don't think there's time because I don't want to say 5 alarm here, but KJ Winston's injury upsets the apple cart in a bunch of different ways for the Nittany Lions, and I want to get into that conversation. So, hello, Sean Fitz. Can you tell us what James Franklin had to say yesterday at practice about the situation, and then the conversation afterwards?
I spent the night crying, as you guys know my affinity for KJ Winston, but it is a long-term injury. If you joined us on the Inside the Den, our premium show yesterday, we talked a little bit about KJ Winston. It did not seem like things were that great, but there were decisions to be made, and the decision to be made is to take care of this and stretch it out long-term. So Penn State going to be out without him for the foreseeable future. Greg Pickle is doing the Lord's work in writing a story on how James Franklin talks about injuries to explain that to the masses. Long-term is the new indefinite. Indefinite was put in because Zariah Fisher was out for the season, then he wasn't. This is a situation where Penn State, there's no obligation to say that, hey, he's never going to play again, or he's not. Well, sorry, that would be a different story, right. But he's not going to play again this year. There's no obligation to do that, so they're not going to do that. Like this is leaving them open-ended just in case something like Fisher happens. So can you get a Fisher back? Can you get a Keon Wiley back? Something like that would be why they talk about it like they talk about it. But the important thing is that Penn State is without one of its best defensive players for the foreseeable future, and it's going to be something that they have to adjust and move around in the next couple of weeks and months.
Yeah, and we're going to be getting into some of those nuances in the situation here, the impact of losing him, and of course, Andrew Rappleyea. We found that out previously. So 2 big important cogs on offense and defense, both out for the season, or I should say long-term injuries. So Ryan, what do you make of the situation from an impact on the Penn State defense?
Great run support player. In coverage, could have been a little bit better, I think, through the first couple of games. Wasn't bad or anything like that, don't get me wrong. But
only got National Defensive Player of the Year in one of those 2 games. So he could have, there was room for improvement there.
Good point. Just really curious to see how Wheatley kind of steps it up now, right? He's been a solid contributor for a long time. Of course, had a bunch of turnovers that first year, didn't have quite the year last year, that we thought maybe he would build off of. But obviously KJ rise to the occasion last year too, and you still have Jaylen Reed. So Jaylen and Wheatley staying healthy now is imperative. I think that position now, obviously linebacker too, with Kobe King and Rojas, those are the key spots now. You can't really afford any more injuries at safety. Would Lane be the next guy to step up? Like who do you think would be the next guy there? They really are high on Lane, but man, if there were another injury there, boy, that would be tough for him to, as a freshman, to step in.
We knocked on so much wood over the offseason about how important those 3 safeties were and how important it was to keep them healthy that it came back and splintered us there. I think Lane's the next guy up in both, that they hope he can be the next guy up, and he's going to have to be the next guy up. Mm-hmm. It'd be very interesting to see how Tom Allen handles this. He likes to play those 3 safeties. Jaylen Reed at the Lion is your best form of his defense, and now you're going to have to probably play him back at one of the deep safeties. So that's the hit right there. How do you move these pieces around? Is it Lane? Is it Dom DeLuca playing more, the field linebacker that we've seen in the first couple of weeks? And I tell you what, there's no upside that's going to match what KJ Winston provides to you on the field. So that's the thing to take away from it. And safety, if you look at the rep count in against West Virginia, it was those 3 guys playing basically every snap, and then there was a big drop off, and that is an indicator of where things are on the depth chart, where things are on the talent roster right there, that they trusted these 3 guys to be around. And unfortunately, they're going to have to make a move 2 games into the season. So that's what hurts. You're going to see a lot more Lane this weekend. Silver lining, and this is as silver as it can possibly get, like Kent State coming to town means that Dejon Lane can play most, if not all, the game to get him the reps that he needs to get him to speed. He's not going to get up to speed where they need him to be for championship defense, but like he can at least get a little bit of that buffer back.
Yeah. Fitz, I just want to play the looks like game here. Again, the silver lining, as you point out, Dejon Lane, if you squint, he looks a little bit like KJ Winston in terms of size, speed, and ability. As you pointed out, all the other things have to fill in because KJ Winston wasn't KJ Winston his freshman season. He looked great. We were all impressed by his initial potential. But is there any sort of, well, maybe they could replicate something in a facsimile because Dejon Lane can do some of those things from an athletic standpoint, even if the IQ isn't quite to where KJ is as a third-year player?
I wish I could say yes, but like all the experience that they have back there is something that really was going to pay off this year with those guys, knowing where the other guy was. And now you move Jaylen Reed around, assuming to put Dejon Lane at the Lion. Like, I don't know that's like the way to go. I don't know which one's the easiest to put him in, like to insert him at. Like, that's the question. Like, before you can talk about a Jaylen is best at the Lion, so he can do that. Move around, he can play run support, he can do that. KJ's best at his spot, Zaki's best as a center fielder. That's great. But now it's like, what is the easiest one to pick up so that you can get him up to speed to get him where he needs to be? So that's the big question that I have for that, because Lion seems like a place where you can, do a little bit more simple things, but also it seems incredibly complex in terms of following receivers and being in the right spot. So there were communication issues last weekend against Bowling Green. I think there's gonna be different kind of communication issues just to get him in the right spot. And then when he gets in the right spot and goes, then you almost feel okay. It's just about getting in the right spot.
Yeah. And I guess you make me think about this situation. And one of the things coming out of that West Virginia game that they were able to do so well is all three guys could play a little bit of each spot. So, I don't know exactly how they break it down, if they have a field and boundary, because they were playing based on however the offense lined up. They could put Zaki Wheatley in the box for a play. They could put Jaylen Reed back at free safety. They could put KJ Winston in the slot. Each guy could do each position. So they didn't really have to change much in the architecture of the defense. They just had to rotate whichever side. Now they got to pick and choose. And so I'm wondering if that field safety, which is a little more man coverage, a little bit less of read, more react, these are all super generalizations. Maybe that's an area where, as a guy who's super fast and we don't know necessarily his physicality in the run game yet, what he could do there. But again, total spitballing situation with that.
It's where do you have to think the least, and that's where you put the freshman. I mean, that if we're going to simplify things, we're going to oversimplify it and say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ryan, when it comes to the way the defense has been playing, a lot of man coverage. How much do you think Tom Allen has to now change what they've been doing from that perspective of the way they've been calling the defense? And do you think there has to be a pivot overall from what they've been trying to do from that side? Are we all here?
I'm back.
Yeah, I'm here now.
I don't know. I don't know what just happened, but everyone's.
Are we still live, everyone?
I think I just had a Nate Bauer incident where my internet just decided, no, thank you. I'm not gonna act. I'm gonna do anything. Did you hear the question at all?
I don't think they have to change a whole lot right now, right? I mean, at least they don't want to. They want to throw them to the fire and see how it plays out. But I don't know, man. Look. KJ Winston is the best tackler on this team, in my opinion. I mean, the amount of true solo tackles that he's able to make. I don't see, maybe Jaylen Reed can kind of step up in that role to some degree, but the run support that he's able to provide, that's where I'm very curious to see. Do they how do they adjust to that? But I don't think Tom Allen would want to change a whole lot right now. I mean, they feel good about the guys that are coming up through. Now you got to test them and see where their weaknesses are and take it from there, I would assume.
Yeah. Sorry. I was just going to look up because I think KJ Winston missed one tackle in 3 years, but it might have been 2. So he
was credited with no missed tackles last year, 46, or solos, I believe it was. I mean, he's by far this team's best tackler, I think, as far as consistency goes. And hey, I mean, we saw last week against Bowling Green. I mean, there were quite a few missed tackles at times, and that's a big talking point always, especially in today's modern game. And now you just lost your most consistent guy there. I mean, there's a reason he led this team in tackles last year, and it's because he doesn't miss.
Yeah, he gave up more touchdowns, 2, than he missed tackles, 1, in 3 seasons and 694 snaps so far this year.
Was also
And
targeted 20 times last year, only gave up 10 receptions. I mean, like,
yep.
it's really good stats all around.
Yeah, so if you want to go inside the conversation we had yesterday, maybe behind the scenes on the decision-making process, all that stuff is still relevant from yesterday's Inside the Den podcast, which, of course, is a great time to remind you, sign up for BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. It's just 2 months for $1, and you get access to all of our premium information, including that Blue White Illustrated member-only podcast, which gets you all of the context and information that we have on these situations, including a great conversation about Beckham Kritza and the situation with Penn State's class of 2025 at quarterback, which Fitz just did an amazing job breaking the whole thing down. So check it out. Again, code PSU1 for our YouTube and podcast audience. We love you. We want to bring you further into the bear hug, into the bro hug we have over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, where we can have these conversations more in depth with you. Fitz, anything you want to clean up before we move on to the next thing with the show?
Steven's got a question that I don't have an answer to, but it's how many points is KJ worth per game, like WAR in baseball? I don't know what that would boil down to, except that I think it'll be fine for most of the schedule. And it's kind of like the defensive tackle talk last year coming out of 2022 is they'll be fine against most teams on the roster because of the depth of the rest of the unit. Yeah. But you go to USC in a few weeks, you get Ohio State in a few months. That's where it can break you right there. And as we've seen with the offense, like points are kind of misleading in that sense. And I think that points given away by not having KJ Winston on an average basis, probably also misleading as well. So it's going to be a hit when USC tries to throw it all over. It's going to be a hit when Ohio State tries to balance you all over, because they're not just a throwing team, even though they've got some credible weapons coming back up. Illinois is interesting because I think everybody thinks that Illinois is still ground and pound, but they're getting it done in a fairly balanced but more passing way. So that'll be an interesting test next weekend. But you get a dry run this weekend against Penn State, which is fortunate.
Yeah, I don't want to get down the rabbit hole of USC and like how they would use that stuff. But yeah, there are certain games where having a safety like KJ Winston and that speed and explosiveness, it never hurts.
There's 2, USC, Ohio State, the games that matter.
Right. Yeah. Something else that never hurts is having a great plan for your future. And if you want a different plan for your future, if you're not satisfied with the trajectory of your career, Andy at myperfectfranchise.net can help you out with that. Andy Ludicky is a franchise consultant. He understands how to buy you into a franchise where you manage a store and you are the owner of that business inside the corporate structure, and you make money, determine your future, determine your hours. And because he has so much experience with different types of these franchises, he can find the right one for you to manage with the right expertise. And this is really important, workload. If you're trying to diversify your life and you don't want to be an everyday owner who's running a business, then there's certain businesses that are good for that. There are other ones, brick and mortar. He knows what's hot in the industry right now in terms of what businesses are making a lot of money, where the best return on your investment is. And just remember, this is an investment. You have to have the right amount of capital. You have to have the right experience and expertise, or else he's not going to tell you, hey, buy into any franchise. He's here to help you find the right one, including now he has a Charter Oak business, I believe is the name of it. It's called Charter Oak, where he can help you find a local business to buy into as well, if that's more your speed. And he's got a process to help you in all of those situations. But check him out, Andy at myperfectfranchise.net, 404-973-9901. Guys, the last time I checked the tickets for this game coming up against Penn State, they were $3 for the cheapest tickets at game time. Ryan, I asked you last week, you guys, this is the problem, is like, we're talking about game time. We've got a promo for game time. The promo is the On3 code. I don't go anywhere or do anything, so I'm a terrible representative for game time. So Fitz, you go to things. How useful is a website that gives you the cheapest deal possible, plus view from your seat?
Well, I'm a guy that likes to go to things, but I also like money. So getting money back is a positive thing in my opinion, and you can do that with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code ON3 for your $20 off your first purchase. I like $20. I would like $20 more, so I'd like that back. Ryan, how important is the code?
Which I did not use. Yes, we discussed this last week, Sean, while you were gone. Yeah. I felt like calling up and seeing if I could do it, because what was funny is even after I purchased it, it asked like, how'd you learn about Game Time? And I put it on 3. I did all the right things. And then I get to the end and I think like 3 minutes later, I'm like, oh man, I missed out on $20 there. But hey, Illinois next week, going to be a night game. There's reason.
That's my fault that I did not beat this into your head enough that you
no,
need to
T-Frank,
use
it's definitely not your fault. I knew
code.
this already. And you don't need to beat in my head. Ads everywhere, on social media and all that. But thanks for taking the blame. I'll Venmo my wife $20 so you can explain it to her then. I appreciate it.
No, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to do that. I was just going to take the public blame for you and say that here's the other thing. Here's the other great thing about Game Time that I know, having played around with the site a little bit, and I'm like these guys. I also love a great deal. It's like finding an undrafted free agent that starts at quarterback for your team, like Brock Purdy. You just feel better about that. Game Time Picks helps you find the cheapest possible ticket, the best deal possible. And cheap doesn't mean bad. It just means the best possible deal for your money. And of course, as these guys said, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's ON3 for your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, guys, let's get into the Penn State recruiting update, which is the thing we do here on this show, giving you the information about Penn State's recruiting efforts heading into the game against Kent State, and also just for this last week. Ryan, I think you've been the one following this a little bit. We talked about it last week. Antonio Branch, there was some smoke. Now there's some official fire. What's going on with Antonio Branch?
Yeah, picks up an offer from Colorado about 2 weeks ago. I think it was September 5th. So yeah, it's almost exactly 2 weeks ago. And he's going to visit this weekend for the Baylor game, night game, should be a good crowd and all that. I just like I said last week, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Sean, you're the Colorado fan, so I'm not going to bash on Dion and that situation out there because, I know it'll hurt your feelings a little bit. It just doesn't. If you're committed to Penn State and you're interested in Colorado, those two things just don't add up to me right now. And I love Boulder. I think it's an amazing school. There's a lot of things about the school and all that fit Penn State, but the programs seem very, very different at the moment. And it's also one of those programs where I just can't foresee a long-term future there for Dion Sanders. Excuse me, not Dion Barnes. He will be there. But that's just what's interesting to me the most, right? I mean, look, it's a visit. I'm trying to figure out if it's an official or unofficial. Sean, have you spoken to anybody about that?
I have not.
To figure that out.
I think it's an official, but
makes sense.
He hasn't. Yeah. He's tweeted 3 times since he got since the summer. One was a Colorado offer, one was a Penn State commitment, one was a Colorado visit. So he's not exactly active on that front. So getting back to him is tough. But
I'm going to text him right now.
Highlights.
And ask that.
Yeah, these highlights are from 2023. We don't have any from 2024 just yet.
I offered to go watch him in person to see if this was an official or an unofficial, but it didn't get cleared through the travel budget. So unfortunately, that's not going to happen this weekend. But Ryan's right. I mean, you're not going to find a program, and this is me talking as someone who's followed Colorado for a long time, and you can probably separate Colorado from what Deion Sanders has been doing, and the good, the bad for everyone. But you're not going to find a program that's probably more polar opposite in terms of how things are run than Penn State to Colorado. So yes, this is a Florida recruitment. A lot of those guys just, they handle it differently, much differently than prospects that we're used to up north. And I'm not surprised he's visiting other spots. But yeah, I agree with Ryan. Like, even as someone that follows Colorado, like Travis Hunter's done after this year, Shedeur was done after this year. I mean, that's got to come into play here, right? So Penn State's been on Branch for a long time. They continue to be in contact, but you can't say that you look at this and you think that this is there's nothing there. But I mean, recruiting is weird, dude. Recruiting is weird. So that's where I'll go with that. We're going to continue to follow and monitor it. Obviously, you don't want your commits visiting anywhere. And looking at the class of 2025, there's not a ton of guys that you're looking at and saying, oh, I think this guy might pop up. Now, you've got a couple guys in California. You've got a couple, I guess Granville's not in Texas anymore, but you've got guys all over the place in Florida. So those guys make a little bit of sense. But for the most part, it's been fairly smooth sailing for that class of 2025 outside of the kids that I guess had mutual breakups with Penn State in this cycle.
Right.
Yeah. Here's the other thing with Branch too, is he's off to a great start this season. 27 tackles in 3 games. I mean, he's making plays. Yeah. Yeah. And Sean, you were really high on him when he committed. I didn't know a ton. I obviously did the general research, but that was in June when everything was pretty hectic. So I wasn't following him maybe as closely as you were. I think he's an underrated player right now. He's barely a 4-star in the industry rankings, and a player that, man, if he continues at his pace right now, got the size, got the measurables, man, he looks like a really good player at the moment.
What's interesting about, and this is overgeneralization, is that when you've got a kid in this area that stands out, it's very clear that he stands out. But when you've got a kid in Miami who's got a couple of D1 prospects on his team, it's a lot tougher to see that. But Penn State staff is very high on this kid. They want to keep him.
Yeah. So how big of a problem is it that a play, as you guys said, you don't want your commits visiting elsewhere? Does the Colorado angle and kind of what you guys have said, if this doesn't make sense from these two schools are not alike, does that signify some sort of change in what's important to him, do you think? And I know I'm asking a little bit of speculation here, but just it seems like that seems to be the problem is, are the priorities changing for Antonio Branch in this recruitment, or is this just generally like, this is a really cool school and a really cool opportunity? Are there enough things that you say it's not a big red flag, I guess?
I mean, we're discussing this on a Penn State podcast, 3 guys in their 30s, now 40s for me. Like, our view on Colorado is going to be different than the 18-year-old kid from Miami. So like that, like as the general college football product or public, at least as we see it on Twitter, on message boards, and everything like that, can point to Dion and be like, yo, this is not sustainable. Like, this is not something that's going to keep up. The 18-year-old kid from Miami and a lot of these college kids or high school kids are seeing it differently. Like, there's an element of coolness there that's not there for a lot of programs. So I think that's very different mindsets, and I don't think we can lose sight of that as 3 white guys talking on a podcast. So
yeah, and the other thing, T-Bag, is it's just hard to answer that. I mean, I haven't really spoken to Antonio about that, right? So I mean, it's hard to know. The people, his support group, are there some people who want to go out there because it's Deion Sanders and it's potentially an official visit, and there's all those factors, or is this like something Antonio really wants? It's just kind of hard to pinpoint that at the moment. I think we can probably get a better answer after he visits.
And never underrate the experience. Like, going out there, getting your picture with him on the sideline. Like, these things are things that matter to kids, and things that matter to not only kids, but as Ryan mentioned, people around kids. Like, they want to be involved too. And I got to say, I love Boulder. I love, Colorado, but it's a very different world. So we'll see how this one turns out.
Yeah, I was in my 30s before I visited Colorado for the first time. So if somebody said, hey, and again, we don't know if it's an official visit, but if somebody paid for a trip for me to go see the Rocky Mountains when I was 18, yeah, for sure. And sometimes these questions, like, they are things people are wondering, there are no answers to, but there is an element of, we're all kind of wondering these factors going into it. One thing I think that we don't need to wonder is that this is probably a great moment for Bradley Gompers, who is the next thing we're going to be talking about here on the show, this next situation. Ryan, you wrote about this over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. The Pittsburgh Central Catholic. Is Penn State trending towards another player from that school?
Potentially. We'll see. Really impressive testing. What was it, 2 years ago now, Sean, right? When he came out to Penn State, 6'4", 215, all the kind of numbers you want to see for a very athletic tight end. Here's the deal. I think he's going to be a linebacker. Would you agree with that, Sean? I kind of lean linebacker.
Yeah, it was 2023 when that happened. He came out to camp, and then he also came to the team camp and worked out. He was with Anthony Specca and Xavier Thomas on that 7-on-7 team, and they were really good. But I just want to clarify that it was before last season, and then he committed to Duke before camp season or during camp season this year, so he didn't get back to Penn State. But yes, I would go linebacker. Yeah,
so let's see where things progress here, but he is off to a heck of a start. I mean, all you got to do is put on the film, and even just kind of comparing last year's film, which, by the way, he was injured last year. I'm not exactly sure how many games he was out. I know he missed a good chunk of games. I got to double check on that. But
can I cut in here and just talk? So people on our site, we've been talking about Gompers for a few weeks now. People on our site are like, why are they dragging their feet? Why have they dragged their feet on this kid? Well, this kid played in 3.5 games last year, broke his collarbone. He had great testing times, etc., but no real position. Penn State actually originally recruited him as a tight end. He's different He's a different build for a linebacker. He's about 6'4", 6'4.5".
He's big.
As you can see, he's a heat seeker, but he doesn't have the length for edge. And that's you look at him and you think, okay, this gives me a defensive end, but the length is the one shortcoming here. So like there's a lot of data points that are murky. And then, you got 3.5 games of tape last year. And then his tape just comes out this year and he's much better. Like it's not a situation where it's like, okay, we saw some of this last year. We saw some data points, but we didn't see that on film. And then this year he just comes out. He might be the best, might be having the best season in the Whippeal. Like he's a really, really good football player. So, and he's 3 games in. So the whole dragging your feet thing is just a product of us covering and following day to day and just kind of hour to hour and waiting for it. Just not, it's not really how it happened. I mean, Ole Miss beat him to the punch. There was one other school that beat him to the punch. I figured once he started posting his offers on Twitter, when you're a committed prospect, that's where you start looking at things. But he's always had an affinity for Penn State, and I'm going to pull the numbers while Ryan goes to our next point. I've got an interesting stat that I want to go to, but I got to get it right before I actually say it.
Ryan, look, he took 3 official visits in the summer, right? So his schedule really didn't align with camp. Like I wouldn't be shocked if he did camp this year. Maybe this would have been sped up a little bit more. Hard to say exactly because the film really pops. I mean, there is a big difference in the film, and they already had good testing numbers. I think they want to just kind of see if that's still kind of where he's at. Again, it was a collarbone, it wasn't like an ACL or anything like that, but it's a situation where if he doesn't take those 3 official visits in the summer, Michigan State was the other one. Obviously went to Duke. I forget, was it Rutgers maybe was the other one? I forget which one exactly. But long story short, that not camping again this year, I wonder how much that may have impacted getting dragged out a little bit. But I think this is absolutely a player that they can land. We'll see. Obviously, the very good connection with Manny Diaz, but I mean, just look at what Terry Smith has done over the last couple of years in Pittsburgh. You have Specca now on the team. You have Gonzalez. You have Xavier Thomas committed. Like clearly, this is a school that Penn State has an excellent relationship with. And oh, by the way, Gompers has visited 5 times, 6 times now. There's been quite a few visits over the years, so we'll see where it progresses.
With respect to Manny and Duke, this is a guy that they can take without complete information because they have enough information that would point him to, yes, he's good enough to be in our class. Penn State is not really at that point, where you can jump a little bit get over your skis a little bit just to take a guy like that. So I think that's where we go with it. And the stat that I have, so this is where I'm going down the road with Gompers. So since James Franklin got here, I believe that was the starting point on this, but they have offered 5 senior risers in Pennsylvania. It was Kevin Givens and Nick Bowers, which Kevin Givens, I think, had an offer before. Kevin Givens and Nick Bowers in 2015, Journey Brown in 2017, and Daquan Hardy in 2019. So 2 different things here. They don't do this often. They didn't do it for Christian Barmore, which they should have done it, but that's beside the point. When they offer these senior risers in Pennsylvania, they feel like they're going to have a really good shot, if not a tremendous shot to land them. So if they felt they didn't have a good shot, they wouldn't have offered Bradley Gompers, because I think the optics in this one matter. If you offer a kid that's committed to Duke his senior year in your backyard and he sticks with Duke, that's not a good look. So I would say that Penn State has a really good shot here based on the prior evidence of all these guys that they would move on late in state. And if you're going to give an offer this late in state, it should be a committable one. It should be one that you want to move forward full force. And it appears Penn State's been doing that with Gompers. So I think that past instances and past logic would lead us to believe that Penn State's in a pretty good spot here.
And also, I'm just going to say the thing that you said without saying it, just to put a fine point on it. That's a great list of players to be on in terms of players who made an impact at Penn State, whatever the timeline for that is. The other thing that I like is a 6'4" linebacker who's a great receiver, his hands and his body control. That's awesome. When you're looking for, maybe you don't have a complete skill set, because I think some of those guys you would say don't have a complete skill set at the position. There's a reason they weren't offered right away, whether it be size, experience, speed, whatever it might be. They did have unique traits that made them useful on the football field at some point. And if you have a 6'4" linebacker, even if he doesn't have great length, but he has great ball skills, 6'4" is 6'4" to get into passing lanes. I really like that.
One other thing, just real quick, the expanded scholarships too. I think look, his film pops enough that I wouldn't be shocked if this still was a hard 85 that Penn State would offer him because of how much his film has popped the first couple of weeks. But now that this is going up to maybe potentially what was it 110, 120, Sean? It does make it easier maybe to expand your net and push harder for maybe not even a Bradley Gompers, but maybe the guy we're going to talk about next.
But also the way Penn State's been in class 2025 in Pennsylvania, like this is a kid who's clearly trending up. That's going to end up in the top dozen.
Right.
So, he's going to move ahead of some of those guys that we're hand wringing about. So
for sure,
I think that's an interesting one there. So I think with moving to 105, it gives you a little bit more wiggle room in taking that guy and feeling good about taking that guy.
105. That's the number. Sorry, I was mixing up the walk.
It's going to be scholarships. Yeah. It's going to be roster caps. It's going to be maybe even like a practice injury reserve squad. Like I think the number of guys that are going to still be around is probably around 120, but it's how you work out the scholarship situation first and how you work out with the roster spots, because walk-ons aren't going away. I know we want to say that, hey, you can just pay walk-ons now and they can be walk-ons without a scholarship. I don't think that's. I think it's slightly changing direction, but it's not going to completely take those guys away
until Ohio State does 105 full, and then.
But you
I'm joking. I'm joking.
Oh God, you made me talk specialists here. Penn State's got what 9 specialists. They got 5 kickers and 3 or 4 not a non-scholarship long snappers. So like you're not carrying 3 scholarship long snappers. Like there's room for these other guys.
Yep.
Speaking of fun film, because I think we all enjoyed watching Bradley Gompers on film. Chaz Coleman, Ryan, this is one you've been following. This guy's fun. So tell us about Chaz Coleman and where he stands with Penn State and what the situation is.
Well, I've been following since 6 a.m. when I woke up and saw that he was offered late last night.
That's what I meant. You've been following for longer than me, who got to it at like 8:30.
No, I didn't know he was on the radar though. The big couple things here. The big thing is he's 6'5". He looks like he has the length on film. I think that's one of the questions I want to figure out, and I think our staff wants to figure out as far as our scouting staff. But we just saw him jump into 4-star range on Monday. Not only did he go from outside to being a 4-star prospect, but he's an 1-300 player at number 211. Really good looking edge rusher. Now, schools are mixed on Chaz as far as whether he will be a tight end or an edge rusher at the next level. I believe Ole Miss Kentucky leans a little bit more towards tight end. I think Penn State likes him a little bit more as an edge rusher. Ohio State has not offered yet, but the Buckeyes do like him as an edge rusher, and he is visiting Columbus this upcoming weekend, or is supposed to at least, for the Marshall game. So keep an eye on that. We'll be curious to see if Ohio State makes a move there. But film certainly pops. I think it's 8-9 tackles for loss already, 4 sacks on the year. And man, that length and the ability to run guys down. He doesn't quite have that LaVar Arrington II burst that we're going to maybe talk about a little later, because that was a good article you had earlier this week, Sean. Guys that are popping right now. But there's a lot to like here, and I think Penn State wants to get him on campus and kind of verify some things and take it from there. But from a film perspective, similar to Gompers, I mean, but there's a lot to like.
Yeah, raw fits, but wow, some of the tools he's working with seem like they are worthy of pursuing at this point.
Pretty amazing. Like, I know coaches don't look at rankings, but for him to go to the 4-star on 3 status and then all of a sudden get all this interest is crazy. It's just a crazy coincidence there. But yeah, I mean, you're always looking for defensive linemen, potential defensive linemen as late risers, because those guys are the ones that, are 6'5" and are just learning to walk and chew gum as they go into their junior and senior year from a prospect perspective, obviously. So it's intriguing to go there. I know Penn State's got some lines in the water around the country at different positions. But yeah, I think this is the first Gompers and Coleman, the first guys that really look at that. And when you look at senior film, the first 4 games is typically the get your foot in the door type thing. And that's what Chaz Coleman did with his start of his senior year. He's making the most of it. And, going back to your point earlier with those guys I mentioned, Journey and Daquan Hardy and those guys, I'd be curious to see how these guys pan out as compared to like the really early takes. Now, Penn State kind of jettisoned the early part of its class, and I think they're probably better for it in terms of football talent. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see the early guys versus the late guys, how that comes about.
So I don't know.
Watch his basketball film, by the way, fans. I spent more time watching his basketball film than I did as an edge rusher, which, he has that spring, he has those hops that every school kind of covets, and reason they put a lot more focus on basketball film than I think a lot of fans realize. He's got a ton of film out there. So just research his name, research Huddle basketball, whatever you want to I think when you see the kind of the hop he has, the spring, even the fast breaks, pretty impressive for a guy his size. I think that stands out to a lot of these schools as much as anything.
It shows up on his film too. I mean, batting those passes down and kind of rebounding. I don't hate the idea of him playing tight end for a lot of those reasons too. And I just want to, not to do this every single time, but I just want to point out when you look at the star ratings, and his 86.5 and a 3-star, and he's nearly in the thousands for his national ranking, his On3 ranking. That's because ESPN does not have him ranked yet, and he's ranked as a 3-star by two other services, but a 91 overall by On3. We feel like we do the best job. We're biased, but 211th being in the On 300, that's pretty damn impressive. So you don't always stargaze, but these things are a good barometer to get you generally in a right place when it comes to what a player's talent is and what he's able to do.
And you brought a damn out of T-Frank. Yeah, that was with authority.
Size is the big thing. I mean, I think that's really Penn State wants to get him on campus, verify some stuff. Same with our staff too. But figuring that out, does he have the length to be an edge rusher? All that. I think that's the next step here, and we'll see where things go.
Just hope he's not 6'2". So
he's not 6'2". I can tell from film he ain't 6'2". This is coming from a 5'9" guy. Really, I'm 5'8". Let's be honest.
The next thing. Sorry, you got me on that one, Ryan. You just totally derailed.
Sorry.
That's all right. It's on me for not being professional. Next thing is Fitz wrote something that I thought was super interesting, and I know it received a lot of attention over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Really well read. Is 5 Penn State commits making a statement in September. Go check out that article because we're only going to talk about a couple of them, but I'm mostly interested in your opinion of LaVar Arrington II, who was a guy that we all went, yeah, why not? When he got his 2024 film out, or excuse me, 23 film, now feels like there's a little more evidence about what he is and isn't as a football player. Fitz.
There's a lot more film now. They're putting it out every week, unlike last year where it was.
There's more film in like one game than there was for his entire junior year. And I don't know if that's a product of the way they do things out there or if he just didn't have as many highlights, but he's got highlights this year. He looks pretty good. And he's playing more of a stand-up defensive end role. We're listing him still as an athlete / linebacker, but you put on this tape, and I know he's got good measurements. He's so lanky that he might not be as long as you think, just based on the way that he's built. But like he looks like a guy that can play defensive end and a guy that's got some twitch as a hand in the dirt type guy. So really excited. I think the thing that I keep going back to is you watch some of these clips and his change of direction is terrific. Like I did not expect him to put some of the moves that he put on and then to accelerate out of it and then go to it. Of course, we know who his father is, and it's part of the lazy evaluation that we did when he was committed. But at the same time, not on 3, of course, but just in general, like that was the talking point. But like he was a guy that would, eventually find the ball and finish. Now he takes a more direct route because he is moving extremely well. He is changing direction extremely well, accelerating and then getting through the ball. I mean, he's doing some really good things. And in the grand scheme of the class of 2025, poor tackle there. Jeez.
That was,
man, you're going to get a letter from that kid's parents. It's probably more impressive than anybody in the class so far. And it's only been a couple of games, but like just from what I expected to what we've seen is pretty darn good.
Yeah, that expectation threshold and then to exceed it so far generally gets, I know that it works on me quite a bit to get me excited about a player and what your future projections for them are. Ryan, I know if it's kind of set the table as possibly an edge defender, still an athlete, with Gompers on the radar now and having all of these guys that have this kind of tweener category or athlete label, where do you see this defensive class shaking out? Is it just like we'll figure it out later, or is there more clarity?
Lazy answer, but yes. The lazy answer, but yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he's still, when I talk to people, there's still plenty of talk about linebacker. I think you just kind of want to get him in the program, get him beefed up still. He has added plenty of weight. That was a big thing too, last winter, I guess. How big was he? At one point I thought we had him listed at like 170 or something like that. Yeah, now he's up in the 200s. So seeing how he progresses that first year, I think will have a massive impact on whether it's linebacker, whether it's edge, and take it from there. But Yeah, he can play either, really. I mean, he certainly him rushing off the edge though was really fun and entertaining. And some of the backside tackles he's able to make. There aren't too many guys with that athleticism, at least in this class. I mean, there are plenty across the country, but maybe in this class that have that burst right now. So let's see if they can get him up to 240, 250, and then maybe we're talking edge a little bit more. But I think the first step is kind of seeing how he reacts to the weight program and taking it from there.
Not exactly an Abdul Carter comparison, because Abdul was that big in high school, but at the same time,
Abdul
maybe
in his living room. Enough said.
Oh, I remember. It was it was ridiculous. It was crazy. When it comes to the other guys on your list, Fitz, who else has been standing out to you that you want to talk about here?
Well, just really quickly on Arrington, you're looking at I'm looking at the commit list right now, and you've got Alex Tash there as a linebacker. You got Cam Smith there as a linebacker. You got Deshaun Burnett listed as a linebacker, and you've got LaVar Arrington the second listed as a linebacker. You're still going after Bradley Gompers. Probably, I think definitely Deshaun Burnett headed to defensive end. Probably LaVar Arrington headed to defensive end. So that like I hesitate to jump that far with Arrington just because you don't know how he's going to grow. He's got the genes, so you don't know how he's going to add that weight, feel with that weight. And if you can get him to play with linebacker at 245 or 250 and move the way that he moves, okay, you can make that argument. But it all depends on how he ends up growing. So there's that. The next guy that I had,
real quick, Antonio Branch has confirmed it is an official visit.
It is an official visit.
Yes.
Wow. All right. Well, that should be the show.
Not a surprise.
So we've been waiting for it. No, the next guy that I had on my list, also out west, Darius Dixon. He's really good this year. Like and we have him ranked low, and I think we're going to take some battering for it because it's like distinctly low as a 3-star. Everybody else has him as a 4-star, and I think he might be a top 100 kid somewhere. But he looks pretty good. I still have questions about the speed just because the documented times out there just kind of give you a little bit more of a spook. But like you put on his tape, and he's covering some really good receivers really well. So that seems to be a hallmark of the cornerback position. I don't know. I'll have to check with sources on that, but covering good receivers is something they want at Penn State. But he's doing
he's aggressive,
a really good job
man.
this year. What's that?
Aggressive, physical. I watched 2 of his full games now. Go ahead.
He's profiled as a perfect lion this whole time because he already plays inside the formation quite a bit, at least in his junior film with Mater Dei. And Jaylen Reed doesn't have the speed of a corner, but he's a really good football player. He tackles really well. He's physical for his size. Those are all things where, again, I don't necessarily care if he's super fast, if that's what they have in mind for him, especially when you got Jameer Joseph. And if you're going after some of those guys in the class of 2025 that do have that premier size and athleticism for the outside corners, like I think he is just such an important cog when you only have 2 safeties in this class. And you looking at all these linebackers we talked about, some of them are going to be defensive ends. Bradley Gompers, 6'4", that's a box linebacker. Alex Tash, that's a box linebacker. I don't see a whole lot of Sams, field linebackers. So they need somebody to play in the slot. And I think they got to lock down with a guy like Darius Dixon. And that makes him a really valuable player.
And T. Frank, we got a question from somebody that donated. So, I think it kind of fits in with that. Do you think they stay? Jay asked earlier, do you think they stay in the 4-5-2 or go more to a 4-3? Some quotes about Dom DeLuca, but I don't know. I think they trust DeLuca out there, which trust will get you so far, and that's another one of those double-edged swords right there. I want to see how Dejon Lane goes because I think Tom Allen would be more comfortable calling a 4-2-5 approach. But do you have the person? If you don't have the personnel to do it, you can't do it.
Yeah, and that's where I think the building of the roster and kind of the losing King Mac didn't make any sense to me. But yes, I also think that the opponents we talked about, and this is something that I was going to get to a little bit later. USC, Zachariah Branch in the slot. You're not playing. You're not playing Dom DeLuca, and you're not playing Jaylen Reed there. You're going to be playing a corner because that guy you have to match up talent to talent, and Jaylen Reed is great, but I didn't expect he was going to be playing in the slot in that game anyway. So there are going to be games where you're playing 3 linebackers. There are games you're going to be playing a corner, and then you wanted to, as much as possible, have Jaylen Reed there. So I think it messes with the percentages of what you're going to be doing there.
Right. And I think that without saying it, like the Penn State safeties had a lot of corner traits. So it's almost like putting a corner in there just by playing with those 3 safeties. You get the best of all worlds. You get the best of corner, you get the best of a traditional safety, and you get the best of linebacker there. So that's where it hurts right there.
Yep, that's absolutely right. Ryan, this wasn't your article, but I wanted to give you an opportunity where there are guys that have come across your radar that you think are having a great September.
I want to give Deshaun Burnett a shout out, right? Because he committed so early in the cycle. I feel like we've kind of overlooked him a little bit. As Sean said, expect him to be an edge rusher. He does a little bit of everything at Amani, but through 3 games, 15 tackles, a bunch of quarterback hurries, 3 pass deflections. Like he's showing progression and some athleticism there that I'm not gonna say we had too many questions about, but we wondered how it profiles to some of the other more athletic, guys off the edge that we know, can really get after it. Had a good summer camp too. Sean, what is it, a 4.6-ish, 4.7-ish, something like
4.6?
Yeah, it was a pretty good showing, I thought. And again, Burnett's a guy that I feel like we've kind of overlooked at times. Again, that happens often when you commit so early in the cycle, and we're always kind of looking at what's next to come. But I want to make sure he gets a little shout out there because his films look pretty good so far, and he's progressing and doing all the right things.
Both sides of the ball too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he looks great as a tight end. I'd still come back to that. I know he doesn't have the length, but
I think Penn State's recruiting tight ends at such a high level,
right?
It's tough to break through there. But at the same time, I think it's more a philosophy type thing where if you know what you're doing on offense and you look good and you look smooth on offense, and you can handle more on defense. We talked about that with Cam Wallace playing defense, and his running back tape and his safety tape like really helped take a good football player. I think there's a misnomer out there that Penn State just wants to stockpile athletes and doesn't really care about the football aspect of things. In fact, I think we had a conversation about that on the board this week with receivers, and that's not the case. So I think that it keeps going back to that.
Yeah. But you can't discredit the measurables and the athleticism too, because then you are you want to find guys who you feel have growth in both areas. And for Burnett, the only part about his game that I was concerned about was that length. But there's ways to overcome even a lack of length, because we've seen guys do it at defensive end and defensive tackle at Penn State if you have other skills to make up for a lack of any one individual area. Next thing is the final thing on the show, and it is a big one. We're going to be talking Penn State, Kent State, the game coming up this weekend. And I want to get your thoughts on what you think is going to happen with the Nittany Lions when they square off against the Golden Flashes, excuse me. So Ryan, is it singular or plural?
It's plural.
Golden.
Okay.
Yeah. Flashes, I think.
We'll see if they flash at all on Saturday. And Ryan, I want to start with you because we haven't had a chance to talk to you about the game. So start us off. What do you think is going to happen this week, and what do you think is important that happens this week?
We all expected Bowling Green to be a blowout, right? And Sean was quick to make sure everybody knew that Bowling Green and Kent State are not the same teams. And props to Sean on that one, because they definitely do not look like the same teams through the first couple of weeks of the season. I mean, they are dead last in defense, total yards. They are dead last in offense, total yards. So let's start there. And now they played Pitt, allowed 567 yards to Pitt. Then allowed 740-ish yards to Tennessee this past weekend, which is just an insane number considering how much Tennessee rotated in that second half. So, look, this Penn State does well in these situations. I know probably fans don't believe that or think that, when they're massive favorites, that they actually do cover them pretty much. I think they're 4-0. I think Greg did an article on that this week. And this is setting up to be the biggest spread, at least since 1999, which is very interesting. We'll see if it surpasses 50 points. But what do you want me to do with this, T. Frank? I mean, how much can I break this game down? They lost to St. Francis. I mean, I'll get right on that.
Ryan, we all had to struggle through the conversation. It's just a rite of passage this week. So I wanted to give Fitz a break from this thing that we did on Tuesday and I did yesterday. So I just wanted to throw you a dead fish on air, and then we can move on to the question of
who were the players James mentioned on Tuesday. I'll mention those guys. I don't remember who they did, but
I haven't. I need to go back because who needs experience the most in this game? I think Dejan Lane is skyrocketing to the top of the list. But take him out of the conversation because we have covered that, Fitz. Is there somebody on the roster that you think is going to be important for the success of the team that is maybe not a freshman we just want to see? Is there somebody that you think the value of playing in this game will translate to confidence or to better experience, therefore better play once Big Ten play hits next week or in October?
Yeah, there's a couple guys. Of course, they skew younger for the most part. Talked about Luke Reynolds on the show earlier this week. Can he get some snaps as like the lead tight end, as the number one tight end? Because they're going to need him to step up with Rappleyea done for the long long term. So I think that's one worth noting on the offensive line. This is where you get Cooper Cousins some snaps. You're going to play him. You might as well play him. You're going to get some other guys some snaps. Javen Williams, I think Nate mentioned him as well.
Yeah.
But even the starters, like even the frontline guys at tackle, like I know that you're not like Penn State fans are not going to look at this and say that you're going to get much from this game, but you're still getting live reps against a defense with Division I players on it. Like there's something to be said for that. So I'm happy to change the tone from it's hard to win football games to Penn State should roll them, but Penn State should roll them, but also get these chances in advance. Tamir Robinson's back. We didn't really talk practice, but Tamir Robinson was back. We talked about that earlier in the week on the site, but I think that's an important one as you cultivate depth in certain spots. Dejan Lane, obviously number one for us here at safety, but how does some of those other guys look? Does Lamont Payne get in there? Does Dakari Nelson and Anthony Speck, some of those younger guys on defense?
Where does Dakari Nelson play? I think is also interesting because this is something, not to derail the conversation, but is there a new conversation that has to be had about Dakari, given he's a safety and maybe he is a guy that you play the lion? Is he a guy that you have to play in the box? Is he playing back at safe? Like I think if you now that you have depth issues at both positions, it kind of evens out the hand. So I guess I haven't seen him in long enough to know what his skill set is at this point. But I think that's a fair thing to be looking for this weekend.
Yeah, I think so. I think one position at a time for Dakari. Those guys that are,
you don't want the Tyrese Mills experience?
Tyrese Mills plays a lot of positions, I guess, on the depth chart and practice and things like that. But then, you get into the game and it's a different story. So
yeah.
And that's one reason, like you look at Elliot Washington, like he's a guy that makes sense for making that change to maybe help you out at safety. Antoine Belgrave Shorter is moving over. So maybe we see him this week. I think that would be very intriguing. That's one that, we kind of talked about during his recruitment that, you thought maybe that because of his size, he'd end up at corner, and then he comes in and runs a 4.4, and you're like, oh, okay, well, you take that size running a 4.4 corner. So I think it'll be guys like that you go to. And again, I hate doing this because it sort of denigrates the opponent, but like Tennessee beat them up pretty good last week and used that opportunity to get their younger players, and this is an opportunity for you to do it. That's why I know people don't like it, but that's why they're on the schedule to help you out and get you through this non-conference schedule. So those are some of the guys. Max Granville is always in this conversation as well. I'm looking forward to that.
Zion Tracy.
He
played 150 snaps last year.
He's a guy that's going to fit in the Lion conversation, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You feel pretty solid about the outside guys, but Cam Miller and Zion Tracy are two guys that you're going to see more of because of this. And it's almost it's a melting pot. You're going to see more of the corners. You might see more of DeLuca. Nate talked about this last night. Do you see, I think this is a bigger argument for Abdul Carter to play more linebacker than the depth issues that they were dealing with 2 weeks in. I think that changes some things there.
I just realized something. We are 52 minutes into a podcast and we have not talked about wide receiver one time.
Look at that.
I was going to leave it open for Tyseer Denmark, who was in his number 4 jersey last night. T. Frank was on pins and needles because he said he's not in a scout team jersey, but then we always go back and look, and it just so happens that a player on the other team has his number. There's no there's no number 4 receiver for Kent State. So we see him this week. I think so.
But also Anthony Ivy, like some of those young guys, they need confidence, right? They need game experience. Who knows what will happen with the wide receivers moving forward. So
and Tyler Johnson is in that group too.
Tyler Johnson.
And I think I can hammer that one home because I took a great photo of him last night, and none of you guys commented and complimented it. And I would just, maybe he's a guy to watch just because I want to put that on the front page.
I was already walking over to practice, and I was like, dang it, that is the one. But it was just like one moment too late. This is in the chat from Ryan, and I want to have this conversation again. I guess seems like the center of the defense is the question mark, which isn't great. Safety, linebacker, even defensive tackle. And I just, guys, why are we still questioning the Penn State defensive tackles?
Because Bowling Green had some chunks last week up the middle, and because of that, it means the group that is actually pretty good can't play.
Yep. Since 2020,
that's it. Like that's it. And West Virginia had some chunk runs. Early.
Linebackers play defense too.
Again, it's all the defensive tackles all the time. And this is obviously lighthearted with Ryan, who's a longtime commenter, and we appreciate that. And I know we believe he's got a sense of humor. So, by the way, T. Frank has his pregame show, and it's outside the Jordan Center. If you don't have a sense of, it's an opportunity for them to sort of like impose their will tomorrow. And I don't think, again, Penn State fans aren't going to take anything from it. But no, they've been fine. Zane Durant's actually been pretty terrific.
Amazing.
Durant's been great. I don't think anyone's questioning Zane Durant. I think fans are just wondering, is Jay Thomas going to take that next step? Hakeem Beamon going to take that next step? I mean, that's the one thing that I just see on message boards, Twitter, stuff like that.
It's like the offensive line. It's very easy to go at the defensive tackles when there's a run, because they're the guys that are the first line of defense. Even if they're sucking up 3 or 4 defenders, like it's easy to go at that. So I think that looking at Bowling Green, the tackling issues that they had, the out of position communications issues that they had in the first half, a lot of that fell on the linebackers. But I think that they'll be okay. Like that, and they've held up before. I mean, we were talking last year about Michigan and Ohio State, and you see Michigan run the ball 50 times in a row or whatever, and you think the defensive tackles aren't holding up. But when you're doing that and you're averaging, what was it, 3 yards a carry, they were actually okay. It's just a matter of untimely lapses on the entire defense, and that's what killed you.
Yes. So I was just going to say this again. Linebackers play gaps too. So you go back to, and I don't want to re-adjudicate every game, but I'll just say this. The last time I saw a bad game or a bad half from the Penn State defensive tackles specifically, not run defense, but the defensive tackles, was West Virginia 2023. It was kind of a similar situation where they were, I think, implementing some new stuff with Manny Diaz. And it was more aggressive, and it was just like they had to get their sea legs underneath them. All of last year, they were great. And when a run bounces to the outside, and again, going back to that Michigan game, a run bouncing to the outside means the defensive tackles did their job. Now, if the edge defender or the last man in the line of scrimmage does not hold the point of attack, that is not a defensive tackle problem. So, Ryan, you ask a question that is an entirely fair question. And this is why you should go to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com every Sunday, because I break down every single game, every single play, and tell you what happened and why. And I'm just here to tell you, Devon J. Thomas is playing good football. Keziah Izzard is playing good football. Zane Durant is playing great football. And they're getting surprising contribution from Alonzo Ford, which I didn't expect. So there's a lot of good stuff there from the defensive tackles. I've totally derailed the conversation once again, because this has been a 2-year thing for me to try and reverse the conversation about the Penn State defensive tackles because of 2021. And so it's just like, it's a thing that I always bite on that bait.
I think fans see, some of the best programs out there and their D tackles making more contributions as far as sacks and things like that. That doesn't mean that Penn States aren't playing good, but I think that's what fans see. They see the Georgias, the Ohio States, the Alabamas. And again, it's not really a fair comparison. Let's be honest. Let's call it what it is. But I do think that's where fans, point things out as far as they're not racking up the kind of the numbers that those very best teams often see from their interior defensive line.
Penn State's best defensive tackle is 6'1", and there's nothing the Penn State is going to do about that in season. That is entirely fair to say. They don't have a first-round draft pick on the defensive line, but as a whole, they're playing football at a high level. And so I guess that is a fair distinction to make. These guys are not going to be superstars that go to the Eagles in the first round, 9th overall somehow. They're going to be players that if they make the league, they're going to be quality rotational players in a lineup.
I think Zane's got some NFL. Yeah, he's going to pop.
No, absolutely. But I also don't think because he's 290 and 6'1", I don't think he's a first round guy, I guess is the distinction I was making.
T. Frank, I got you something for you to workshop with defensive tackles, rushing yards or yards per carry, and pitcher win stats. Like you always talk about pitchers and wins are not a pitcher stat or actually a quarterback stat. Like I think you need to workshop that and come up with something. Also, Real Deal says we'll know how good they are when they play Illinois. Illinois is 11th in the Big Ten in rushing right now. They're not what you think they are.
They're going to get smoked against Nebraska, I think. Not smoked, but they're not going to win. I think Nebraska might be all right, man. I don't know.
8 minutes in, we got a hot take.
Okay, smoke's a little aggressive, but I don't think Illinois is going to come in here ranked next week, personally.
Illinois is better than they were last year, but they still have the same problems that they had last year. So during the bye week early in the year was great. I got to watch USC. I got to watch Illinois. I would take a September bye.
It was really fun. Yeah,
but Illinois will always be the 2021 version of Illinois to Penn State fans that ran for 350 yards and scored 10 points. Yes.
All right, let's get to our game predictions. The final nail in the show coffin to get us out of here for the weekend. Of course, we've got the tailgate show coming up at 12:30 on Saturday. Please tune in for that. We got a great show with former Penn State offensive lineman Landon Tangwall. So we're going to get to those conversations and break down the game even more. So it's not the last time you're going to hear from us, but it is the last time on the live show. So Fitz, score prediction for this weekend.
Thank you to Ryan, who pointed out that I pointed out that Bowling Green was a good MAC team and much better than Kent State. Thank you for also not mentioning that I picked Penn State to win, cover, and blow out Bowling Green. Anyway, I expect Penn State to win, cover, and blow out Kent State. It is a big line for a reason. Kent State is probably the worst football team in the country. And you don't get any style points for winning this game, but a week after Tennessee beats them 71-1, I keep going back to this, Penn State and Tennessee are stacked in rankings, and this game is not meaningful for rankings as well. But if you can't just blow them out of the water like Tennessee did, people are going to look at that and say, I wonder what's up here. And do it meaningfully, run your stuff, run it successfully, get out of there as quickly as you can with as few injuries as you can. I don't think the points are easy to predict in this one because you just feel like they're going to be there. You get a pick six, you scoop a fumble and go. I think there was a strip sack last week. You've got freaky stuff that happens where these points add up. I've got 62-6, and I had to actually dig for that one. I couldn't remember what I predicted, but I think Penn State pretty cut and dry in terms of how much better they should be. They just got to run their stuff and be successful about doing it. And honestly, and you hate saying it, but just keep going. Run your offense through the fourth quarter. If you got to get Bo and Grunk to throw some passes because they need reps, you got to do it. And it's just the downside, the part of the game that we don't like to talk about, but you got to do it.
Ryan.
Hey, I was right on one thing with Bowling Green. I said Gronk wasn't going to play, right? But that was a little different. Look, I do think maybe we could see Gronk this week. 63-7. Penn State covers normally in these situations. So 4-0, right? When we're a favorite of 40 or more. So we'll make them 5-0. We're predicting to be 5-0. We'll see what happens. But again, I laid out the stats earlier. The worst team as far as total yards on offense and defense. Lost to St. Francis team that I think last year had a losing record. I mean, what was Kent State last year? 1-11, or did they? I don't even know if they won a game last year. It was bad. So it's a pretty, this whole program's probably going to get blown up at the end of the year. So we'll see where things go. Penn State needs to get their young guys some confidence, get their young guys some reps. We'll see how it plays out. But 63-7, I gave them a late touchdown.
I did the same thing. I pulled the number out of the air, and turns out I had the same number as Ryan. So I'm really good at guessing, I think, because Ryan did a lot of research and I just went, I don't know, what's a good number? I think I did 7 times 9, and that's how I got to this number. And then I was like, I'll give Kent State a touchdown because fluky things happen. So these guys are great. I guess every single time when we look at these score predictions, but I also think it is indicative of the gulf between the two teams typically, or the strength and weaknesses of each team. That is something that when you look at this across the board, everyone has a similar prediction. And by the way, check out bluewhiteillustrated.com for all of our staff predictions each week that we put out before the game. So guys,
I will say Kent State's last win, September 16th, 2023 over Central Connecticut State. They played Pittsburgh the first week of the season, 55-24 there. Of course, 71-0 against Kent State against Tennessee last weekend. But the one that gets you is they lost to St. Francis, PA. That's tough. That's also really tough.
Also, Steven, you're saying they can't score in the 60s. They scored 63 last year against UMass in what was a downpour, and this offense should be a little more juicy, a little more pop to it. So I think they can get 60.
Yeah. We'll see how it all plays out, and we'll have more of this conversation. And at some point, I'm actually going to be able to watch Kent State film. This week has been insane. So we'll talk about all of that on the Tailgate Show coming up on, I got to have a somewhat informed opinion about it.
You have fun with that, buddy. You have fun with that.
No, there are certain things where it's a job that you have to do, not the job you want to do, even if it's fun. We'll do all of that, and we'll have your information, all that stuff about the updates with Penn State football tomorrow, and of course on Saturday. Join us, bluewhiteillustrated.com. Great time to sign up because you get all that information, insider info as it comes to us. So please subscribe. We'll have the conversation. Keep going there. I'm Thomas Frank Carr for Ryan Snyder, Sean Fitz. We'll talk to you then.